chief executive officers of largely Fortune 500 companies for a breakfast, during which he didn't have breakfast, but all the others there did. The approach that the Prime Minister followed in that interaction was that he laid out his vision for economic development in India, and then said that India is open-minded and we want change, and we want change that is not only one-sided, and he felt for that change to be broad and acceptable, it required inputs from a variety of sources. These include citizens, of course, but also industrialists and investors. And he said that this was part of his process to engage investors to invest in what he envisages are going to be major and dramatic developments in India's economy during the next few years. And this was part of his attempt to, on the one hand, brainstorm and get ideas, and on the other hand, to hard sell and promote his vision of India and inclusive development that he has. So he laid out a whole host of things that have been undertaken during the last 3 to 4 months, things that he has repeated again today in his speech at the think tank, the Council for Foreign Relations. Basically that how he had opened up investment in certain areas, for example railways 100%, 49% in defense, the Make in India program, which according to him has a distinctive feature that for the first time it holds the Indian bureaucracy to strict timelines. He said here decision makers have to respond to requests for information or projects in specified timelines, and this he felt was a defining feature which was different from what were the approaches previously. The response of and then he went around the table asking for responses and suggestions. The responses of most of those who were present were very enthusiastic, and I will try and quote for you some of them so that you understand the sort of responses that they were. For example, one of the CEOs said that the day following the elections, he said, India was a different place at 6 a.m. the day after the election results. And so he said, there is a great desire now to participate in India's growth. There were others who said that they wanted accelerated engagement in India. There were some others who felt that they had capacities, for example, where they can create wealth from waste in terms of energy, solid waste, etc. Of course, there were others who also did express their views and concerns on current policies and environment. For example, there were several who did mention about the need for a stable tax regime, and Prime Minister did assure them that he himself was committed to a tax regime which is stable, and he had said that he repeatedly has clarified that there is no intention to not, because it is his conviction that a stable tax regime is a necessary requirement for investment to flow. There was, for example, another request about coal blocks, those who were interested in the energy sector. And they said that changes of the sort with Supreme Court judgments, etc. So Prime Minister's view was that he wanted to convert the judgment of the Supreme Court on coal allocation into a major opportunity to move forward and clean up the past. He said that the government was studying the judgment. He understood the concerns that some of those investors raised about such matters. He said they were also examining the old rules and also transparency aspects which were highlighted in the Supreme Court's judgment. As far as he was concerned, his first priority was India's energy requirements, and taking that into consideration, they can expect quick decisions from the government on this. He said that they are considering a series of options, including possible auction, possibly public-private partnerships, or else public sector mining organizations working on this matter. So there were a whole host of options that they were considering at this stage. That's about his discussions with CEOs. He had 11 for breakfast, and then they were followed by individual meetings. I meant 11 those who were at the breakfast table, and there were others who were, as you know, Prime Minister didn't have any breakfast, so he couldn't have 11 of them. That said, there were others who followed in terms of individuals who had investments in India or were planning investments. In the context of that discussions, Prime Minister did invite BlackRock Corporation, and they had agreed to have a major investor conference in India early next year, where they would work with the government of India to bring in major investors from all across the globe, and they expected that, based on their experience of similar conferences in the past, they expected that the first effort of this sort would have investment opportunities of something in the vicinity of 6 billion if they work towards it in the next few months. Following these interactions with business, Prime Minister had a very warm and cordial interaction with former President Clinton and former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton. Prime Minister was joined by the External Affairs Minister during this interaction. The photos are available for you to see the warmth of and affection between them. I will try and say some of the things that were raised in that and give you some quotes of what President Clinton and Mrs. Clinton mentioned about. For example, when President Clinton, when he came, among the first thing he said that I'm thrilled, I'm extremely excited since you were elected. And then he said in his assessment, no one had the knowledge or the votes before you to build a national economy and national infrastructure, and therefore he was extremely excited about the prospects for India, with the Prime Minister now having a majority as well as a track record which he had proved in his previous stint. In the discussions with President Clinton and Mrs. Clinton, largely these were related to the initiatives of the Clinton Foundation in India, and these covered a very broad spectrum, including supply chain management issues, including diagnostic testing possibilities in India, solar energy. Yes, and Prime Minister on his part raised the issue of sickle cell anemia, which he is very concerned affects certain parts of India in certain tribes. So he felt that if the Clinton Foundation could work on this. He also mentioned his recent visit to Japan, where he had discussed this matter with a leading Nobel laureate, but felt that the Clinton Foundation could also work on this matter. Then there was a fairly long discussion about Prime Minister's efforts to clean up the Ganga, and he explained what was the rationale and how he sees working on this and requested the Clinton Foundation to consider working on small areas of this. President Clinton said he was extremely delighted on this, but he would like to go back and check where and in what specific area that the Clinton Foundation could work on this. And he said that, I thank you for undertaking the job of cleaning the Ganga. It is a sacred project and a smart approach. And Senator Clinton then added that this effort will send a message to others in Asia, because she felt that there were in several parts of Asia over the years a neglect of major river basins and rivers, and she felt that this would perhaps set the tone for a renaissance in terms of addressing in Asia how people interact with water bodies. I think that broadly covers the interaction relating to President and Mrs. Clinton. This evening I just run through some of the broad points of this evening's interaction between President Obama and Prime Minister. This was again a dinner meeting, and again I'd like to clarify, Prime Minister said did not have anything except for warm water. But the conversation was extremely convivial, and the discussion was largely a sort of a get to know each other approach. And therefore, Prime Minister was asked to outline his vision of what were the issues that he faced so far and how he is working on it. And remarkably, some of those things that he mentioned seem to have a resonance from President Obama, because he said he had similar concerns when he came in first. I mean, they had many similarities that they exchanged in terms of both had used technology in their campaigns very successfully. Both were relative outsiders to Washington in terms of both were relative outsiders to capital cities when they assumed power. Both had great interest in technology, and they had difficulties in initial or disappointments in terms of initial infrastructure when they started seeing what was available for governments. For example, Prime Minister said that when he came from Gujarat, he found that the technological infrastructure in Delhi was not what he was even used to in Gujarat. President Obama said something similar was his own experience, and how he had gone about focusing on technology and e-governance initiatives, which is something which Prime Minister himself is very keen about. So there were these commonalities that both shared in over conversation which was spread about 90 minutes. Apart from that, Prime Minister in great detail laid out his hopes and aspirations for India in terms of, again, what I had outlined earlier of what is his development vision and how he feels that the United States could help out in that development vision. They had agreed that they would take up more substantive issues tomorrow morning when they meet, both in a restricted format as well as in delegation level talks. But in general, the thinking was that there was a lot of goodwill for India and United States in each other's countries. People-to-people relations were extremely cordial. There was a feeling that they should try and focus on some big things that they can achieve in a finite time period during the next few years. There was a feeling that India-US relationship is amongst the most important relationships both felt in the world today, and therefore it was incumbent on both of them to work towards strengthening and deepening this relationship. they have issued a vision statement which is now available to all of you, and tomorrow morning they will also be penning a joint editorial in a leading US newspaper. I think, of course, after their discussions tomorrow morning, there will be a joint statement which lays out the length of the land in terms of the substantive discussions that they will have tomorrow. I think I will stop at that because I have given you a sort of a broad understanding of the interactions today, and if there are any questions, I will respond to them. But please remember, I answer to only one question from one person. So choose your question carefully. Yes, sir. Just a minute, respond to them. But please remember, I answer to only one question from one person. So choose your question carefully. Yes, sir. Just a minute, we'll get the mic.
Akbar, who else was there at this dinner apart from Mr. Obama, President Obama and the Prime Minister? Did the First Lady join them?
No, this was a sort of official delegation on one side and an official delegation on the other side. So there was Vice President Biden, there was Secretary of State Kerry, there was the National Security Advisor Susan Rice, there was USAID Chief Mr. Shah, and there were a few other senior officials from the US side. My understanding, there were about 9 of them. On the Indian side, there was External Affairs Minister Srimati Sushma Swaraj, the National Security Advisor Mr. Doval, Ambassador Jaishankar, Foreign Secretary Mrs. Sujata Singh, and other officials who deal with the US, both from the Prime Minister's office as well as from the Ministry of External Affairs. 9. And 1 interpreter, if that makes it 10. Yes. It's available on the website, so you can read it. The light is it's in full focus. Yes, Manish.
Akbar, while more substantive discussion will happen tomorrow, in terms of issues, where some issues flagged off by the Prime Minister or from the other side? Some
no,
key
I mean,
issues, yeah.
There was general understanding that India and US can work not only need to work not only in terms of bilateral relations but elsewhere in the world. So there were talk of possibilities of working together on Ebola, for example, in Africa. Also Afghanistan. These were the 2 issues which were broadly flagged. There was yes, Geeta.
Did they discuss the ISIS situation and cooperation on that at all?
No, I mentioned to you they did not get into direct discussion of any of the substantive issues. This was a general, again let me clarify, this was a very cordial and comforting conversation where each was trying to understand others' perspective, and they did not get into very detailed substantive discussions which will follow tomorrow. Yes, Ashish? Just by if somebody wanted the names, the others were Nisha Biswal and Mickey Dickinson, and there is Mr. Vinay Thumalapalli from the American side, and then there was Phil Reed. Yes.
Sir, I'm just tempted to ask. आपने बताया माहौल तो बहुत अच्छा था, अच्छा दोनों के बीच बातचीत में. What we have heard from sources, sir, कि President Obama ने केमछो कह करके स्वागत किया प्रधानमंत्री नरेंद्र मोदी का. प्रधानमंत्री नरेंद्र मोदी ने भी क्या गुजराती में जवाब दिया मजमाछो?
देखिए, ये आप जो सोर्सेज कह रहे हैं वो मैंने ही ट्वीट किया था, तो इट्स अवेलेबल. ऐसे कोई छुपने वाली बात नहीं है क्योंकि ये ट्विटर पर अवेलेबल है. He responded, "Thank you very much, Mr. President." क्योंकि उन्होंने उनकी जबान में कहा था और प्रधानमंत्री ने प्रेसिडेंट ओबामा को अपनी जबान में कहा। यस
सर, इसी से जुड़ा हुआ मेरा सवाल है कि अक्सर जब प्राइम मिनिस्टर फॉरेन विजिट पर होते हैं तो वो गीता का ज्ञान जरूर देते हैं, तो आज क्या गिफ्ट लाए थे बराक ओबामा के लिए? हाँ,
कई गिफ्ट्स लाए हैं। एक पर्सनल लेवल पर उन्होंने एक स्पेशल एडिशन ऑफ गीता लाए हैं बाय गांधी जी। दिस इज स्पेशली प्रिपेयर्ड, मेरे पास उसके फोटोज हैं, अगर आप में से किसी को चाहिए तो वी विल सर्कुलेट दोज फोटोज। पार्डन, दिस इज गीता बाय गांधी जी, Gandhi ji's interpretation of the Gita. This is of course a book which was published many years ago, but Prime Minister has specifically ordered a special reprint of that book, and copies of these were specially done up in a certain get-up with khadi on its cover and certain other silk covering, etc., and all in a box. These were prepared in Delhi and brought and were handed over to the President today. Also, he has given certain other personal gifts. For example, tomorrow he is going to Martin Luther King's memorial, and he is aware that President Obama has great regard for Reverend Martin Luther King. And there is a Gandhi link between President Obama and Martin Luther King and Prime Minister. So he had looked up and requested All India Radio to provide a recording of Reverend Martin Luther King's speech which he gave in India in 1959 when he visited India. In addition, let me complete, ma'am. In addition, there are some other memorabilia of Reverend Martin Luther King. There is a photograph of Reverend Martin Luther King at the Rajghat, which Prime Minister has framed and given to President Obama. In addition, there is a small clip which goes back to again 1959, where Photos Division was able to trace back a video clip of Reverend Martin Luther King's visit to India, and all these were prepared by the Prime Minister's office in advance and were handed over to President Obama today. These were his personal gifts, and I will tell you tomorrow about the official gifts, because these will be given tomorrow. Yes. Yes, sir.
अकबर साहब, तस्वीरें कब देखने को मिलेंगी इस प्राइवेट डिनर की? क्या तस्वीर नहीं है कोई, वो आप ट्वीट कर दें?
तस्वीर भी मिल जाएगी, डिनर पे तो कोई तस्वीर भी है, आपको मिल जाएगी। वो बेचारे काम कर रहे हैं, तो जैसे काम कंप्लीट हो जाए आपको मिल जाएगी। बस कुछ ही क्षण इंतजार करिए, ब्रेक के बाद आ जाएगी। यस मैम।
Seema Siroi, I was wondering, from your description it sounds like it was rather a formal setting with almost like a delegation style meeting where dinner happened to be served. When it was described before as a private dinner, I thought maybe they'd go for a walk together in the gardens or something and have a chance to chat with each other and develop some personal equation. So that didn't happen, it sounds like.
I mean, there are different people who can develop personal equations differently. What you say is one way. The other way is if they exchange anecdotes of how they have seen their first few months in office, their experiences, whether there are commonalities or not. And I think that is also a way of understanding each other. I suppose you have a way of perceiving it. There are others who have other ways of perceiving it. But I can tell you there was no walk in the lawn in the White House, if that is what you're looking for. Yes, sir.
You listed all the gifts from Modi to Obama. What about Obama to Modi, one? And while they were exchanging gifts, what were they wearing?
What was it wearing?
What were they wearing?
The same things they were wearing otherwise. I mean, they were not. Let me tell you one more thing, that these gifts are not exchanged. Oh, let me take out now. Open it. See, this was not the way it was happening. That is in Seema's vocabulary, perhaps more befitting of going. But Prime Minister had paid special attention to President Obama's own interests, and he brought these gifts, which were his personal gifts to President Obama. As government officials, there are other elements of gifts which we will inform you once they are exchanged tomorrow. I explained to you his personal gifts. I do not know, because if there are any personal gifts from President Obama, once I know, I will share it with you. But otherwise, you can always ask. You are resident here, you can always ask the White House. Yes, sir.
Raghubir Goyal. Today I asked question to the White House about this evening's meeting, because since this was the first meeting between the two leaders, Prime Minister Modi and President Obama, the reaction from the spokesman from the White House was that yes, this is going to be the first meeting, and it is an opportunity between the two leaders to know and get to know each other, and then they can move from there on. My question is, have they known now after this meeting, do they know each other now, because they have so many similarities, and also so they can move tomorrow morning with the new that they know each other? And finally, what was the sort of reaction from President Obama as far as these gifts are concerned?
First of all, I never respond, welcome to interacting with me. I never respond on behalf of another country. I respond on behalf of India, because I am the spokesman for the government of India. If I try and paraphrase somebody else's view, I may be wrong. So when you go tomorrow to the White House, please ask them what was President Obama's reaction. I can tell you Prime Minister's, I've given you a background of Prime Minister's diligence in terms of trying to give a personal touch to this. Now, what were President Obama's reactions? I think you should ask the American side, because they will be able to express it better than me. As regards the first part, I've already told you, and before you told me this and revealed to me what the White House had told you, I also explained to you in similar lines what was the basis of that interaction. Yes, ma'am.
This is about the joint editorial tomorrow. Is it the first time that an American president and an Indian prime minister are writing a joint editorial? And I know you don't like an and, but is this the only exposure to the media that the two heads of government are going to have?
Oh, my understanding is that they will be making press statements also, which will be televised. There will be, of course, limited number of people there, but they will be making press statements. Yes, my understanding again is this is the first time an Indian leader and an American president have ventured on this path of a joint editorial. Just let me finish one by one. Pardon? One by one. If I tell everything, the publication is not going to like me in advance. So please hold on. That's number one. As regards, what was your second question? I already answered that. So yes, Siddhana.
Sir, is it fair to call this an official dinner, and how would this be different from tomorrow's delegation level meeting?
Well, I don't know what you want to call it, but I can describe it fairly as a very successful interaction between Prime Minister and President Obama. And since this was their first meeting, it certainly has started off on a note where both the sides are extremely happy with the outcomes. Tomorrow, I told you they had decided to focus on specific issues tomorrow. Today was a free-flowing discussion on a variety of things. These were largely about themselves, number one. Number two, about Prime Minister's vision for India. And number three, about certain areas where they could cooperate together in the world. And these were the three elements in that. Yes, KP?
Do you have a list of the 11 CEOs who had breakfast with the Prime Minister?
Yes, I have the list, and that should be available. Yeah, it's available on the website, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah.
Could you tell us a little bit more about this joint editorial in terms of how the idea came to be, how the collaboration took place, since they were meeting each other for the first time today? When was this written?
You know, Prime Minister wrote an editorial to the Wall Street Journal some time ago. That was also a first of sorts. So we are moving down many firsts. This thought came up while we were working on the editorial of the Prime Minister, and Prime Minister immediately agreed to it, that if this could work out, it would be very good. And then they worked through various both Prime Minister and President Obama are great votaries of digital diplomacy, and therefore it's very easy to digitally to interact through electronic means. And it was only finalized just this evening after Prime Minister's arrival here, and that's why we couldn't tell you in advance. Yes, sir.
You said both the leaders are great advocates of digital diplomacy, and both are also the most popular they have the largest number of followers on Twitter, but we haven't seen both of them exchanging notes over Twitter.
Just wait for it. Maybe tonight you may see something.
Okay. Thank you.
Prime Minister usually tweets in the night. Please check. Yes, ma'am.
You were talking about first, we think this may be the first time the President has hosted someone who is on a fast, so I wondered if I could ask you what the arrangement was at the table. Did he have a plate in front of him, and did the President eat, and do you know what the President and the people who were eating were dining on at this dinner? And where was it, if you know?
Where was it? I must confess I didn't notice what the room was, so I'll try and go back and look up my notes. I didn't write that down where it was. But that said, yes, there was a plate served as is normal protocol, that there is a plate kept, and Prime Minister mentioned that he didn't want to embarrass anybody even while they continued with, and he requested that they continue with their normal practice of having the dinner while he would have his warm water. Yes, the President did have the normal food, and those of you who are interested, I have the menu card and you can use it. Yes, no, you finished. Anyone else? No, once, I always, that's it. Anyone else? Yes, Raj. And then we'll wind up.
Akbar, during this discussion, did they review the state of Indo-US relations and what was wrong with it and what needs to be done about it?
Raj, I don't think from the interaction that they had, they ever felt there was something wrong about it. They only felt that there were possibilities of deepening it, widening it, and strengthening it. But they were both quite happy that they were moving from a strong base. Prime Minister and President Obama both felt that the relations were good, but they need to move it to the next level, and that was the focus. I don't think ever the word wrong came about in this discussion. Yes, sir.
Why was the First Lady not there at the dinner? She was supposed to be there in the first place.
Who?
The First Lady?
I don't know. You are saying all this. I mean, I'm not aware of what you are saying. Was supposed to be there. Did you know this in advance? No. Pardon? Well, yeah, the answer is here from somebody who knows the White House. I think you should address all these questions to the host. I mean, How would the guest know this? Yes, sir. No, I don't answer, Chidanand, not you. Yes, ma'am. Oh, here it is. The answer is here. No, here. The answer is there again. Please, ma'am. Ritu.
Will be a press statement issue tomorrow.
Yes.
What time will that be? And will the President and the Prime Minister be taking questions?
My understanding is, I said press statements means press statements. And that will be around, I think, between 12:15 or something like that. 12:15 to 12:30. Yes, ma'am.
At the dinner table, Prime Minister's fasting and his habit became a matter of discussion by anybody. Anybody from the horse side asked about it?
No, there was no discussion on that. There were many other important issues to discuss, so this was not referred to at all. At the starting, Prime Minister said, I hope, please don't feel embarrassed and please continue with your food. And then there was no further reference to that.
So this entire idea of fasting was taken for granted?
Pardon? Yes, this was no, in diplomatic practice, it is normal to inform the host of the dietary preferences of the guest in advance. So they were all aware of it and were prepared for it. Yes, ma'am.
I'd like you to clarify this statement. It's a statement coming in from a senior BJP leader who says, happy that Modi committed to Obama that India would join the anti-ISIS war. Now Indo-US good relations will reach new unprecedented heights. Do you confirm that there is such an agreement on an anti-ISIS front between India and the US?
I think I mentioned that this issue was not discussed. It is likely to be discussed tomorrow morning, and the outcome will be available in the joint statement. If there are no further questions, yes, sir. Yes, please.
Sir, Vikas from the Economic Times.
Yes.
I just wanted to get a sense whether the Madison Square Garden address of the PM came up over the informal part of getting to know each other like you described it. Did the President say something to, you know?
Well, the President there was a sort of a discussion of how long the Prime Minister was here, and the President did indicate that he had heard reports of the tremendous reception he had got at the Madison Square Garden. Yes.
So were there any personal gifts for the family?
Pardon?